in order to create more advanced and responsive website layouts, you need to learn how to use div tags. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to code with HTML and CSS to create more advanced website layouts. I'll also be showing you how to make your web pages responsive, and I'll also show you how to create CSS menus from scratch. So let's get started with the tutorial. Now, before we can actually start writing any code, the first thing we need to do is actually create our actual files that we're going to start writing on. So to do that, within Dreamweaver and within our site root, you have two options. The first way of creating a new file is go File, New, but the easiest way is in your Files panel is to right-click and select New File. Okay, so I'm going to call this page layout.php, but you can call this file absolutely anything that you want. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and select New Folder, and I'm going to title this folder CSS, because what we're going to be doing in this tutorial is actually creating external style sheets. The reason we do this is that it comes in handy further down the line when we're actually creating websites that have an extensive number of pages. We can update a single style sheet and changes will take effect site-wide, rather than having all of our CSS within our single documents and having to update all of them individually. It's also more beneficial because it does make our code that much more clean. I'm going to right click on my CSS folder and select New File, and I'm actually going to title this my main body.css, and that's our first style sheet. So if I open up my layout.php and collapse my files panel, the first thing I'm going to note is that whenever you start a new project or you create a new page, it's just good practice to actually give your page a proper title. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and I'm just going to call this layout tutorial. Of course, you can name this anything you want relevant to the site or project you're working on. Now, the first thing I'm going to note is that right now my cursor, if you can see it, is sort of in the middle of nowhere, and when it comes to actually writing some HTML and CSS, and when we start inserting div tags in our elements, this is going to affect it in terms of positionally. So the first thing we're going to do is set a proper margin. Now, we can write this, but it's pretty simple, and the easiest way to actually go about doing this is just to click on Page Properties from our Properties Inspector and actually set a 0 margin. Now, once I click on OK, and I can save those changes, if I come into Code View, you're going to see that Dreamweaver has already written the code for us. It's created basically some very simple CSS, just setting the margin. Now, from now on, we're just going to be handwriting all our code. Now, just to give you a brief background, this is all HTML. Of course, this is CSS. We have our basic doc type, then we have our head tags, and of course here we have our body tags, and we're going to be inserting our div tags between our body tags. So to begin, the first thing I'm going to do is actually call in our external style sheet that we just created. So just underneath my opening head tag, I'm going to do the following. So href, come into my CSS, select my main body CSS file, real, and then here we're going to call this style sheet, and finally we're just going to have to set the type to text CSS. So now if I save that, you're going to see that we can now access our main body CSS within this file, which is handy, especially if we want to work in split view. And that will come in handy a little bit later in the tutorial when we start developing our menu. But to just begin, I'm going to create a very simple website layout. Just going to collapse the Properties Inspector to make this a little bit easier for you to follow. Okay, so let's begin. The first thing I'm going to do is just create my HTML for the div tags. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new div, and I'm going to give this the ID of container, and everything will sort of be explained later on in the tutorial. Okay, that's my first div tag. I'm going to be inserting the rest of my divs within this container div. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another div. I'm going to give this the ID, I'm going to give this the ID of header. And I'm then going to create another div. This one is going to be called sidebar. And finally, we're going to call the next div main body. And the final div we're going to call footer. And actually, I'm going to create one more, and this one is going to be called menu. Fantastic. Now, if I actually come into design view, this is basically what you're going to see. Because there's no CSS, there's no rules telling the web page how to display the div tags. So we need to use CSS to mold and design our page. So all of this, as you see, is HTML. And to actually write our CSS, we've created this external style sheet. So assuming I can remember the div tag names, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to target the container div. Now, to explain, I'm going to use the hashtag, and then I'm going to follow it with the ID of the div I want to target. So in this example, I'm going to target the container, and then basically I'm going to open and close this CSS with opening and closing curly brackets. So it's pretty simple. And I'm basically here, I'm just going to set a width, and I'm going to set the width to 800 pixels, which is generally what you want to be working with when it comes to developing your pages. Now, at the end of every single line of CSS, we use a semicolon, and the semicolon basically tells your browser to that this line of code is finished, move on to the next line. So every single time we finish on a line of CSS, we use a semicolon. Now for the height, I'm going to be setting this to auto, and actually that's pretty much about all we need to do for this div tag. So now if we come into design view and we click in, you're going to see that this is the container div. So all the divs we created are within this sort of master div. Imagine a bag full of shopping. The bag is containing all of your shopping, and this is exactly the same. The one thing you're going to notice, which I have forgotten, is that this div tag is kind of going to the left. If I select it, it's going to be a little bit clearer for you. So to fix that, I'm just going to come back to my CSS. I'm going to add a margin, and I'm going to be targeting the left and right margin. And I'm going to set this to auto, and I'll explain that in a second. So left and right auto. Again, don't forget the semicolons. Come into design view, and the div is now centered. It might be nice to actually add a little margin from the top too. So I'm going to set the margin from the top to about 11 pixels. If I save it, come back, you're going to see that's just lifted it off the page that little bit. So let's go ahead and start developing our page. Just come back. Okay, so we have the header div, the menu, sidebar, main body, and the footer. So let's come back to our CSS file. The first thing we're going to target is, of course, the header. We do that in exactly the same way. A lot of the CSS will actually generally be the same. So what we're going to do is we don't really need to set a width for this because it's going to use the width of the container div, but we are going to set height, and the height for this, let's set that to about 150 pixels. We don't need to center this because, of course, it's just going to run off the container div. But what I do want to do is I want to set a background color. And the reason I want to set a background color is just so that it's clearer for you guys that are following the tutorial. So now if I come back into design view, you're going to see we now have sort of the remnants of a web page layout. So this is basically your header. You could put a banner here, your logo, or anything you want. Now the next div we're targeting is the menu div. So let's go ahead and target that. So hashtag menu, opening and closing curly brackets. Okay, so again, all we need to do here is set the height. And I'm not really sure what the height for this is going to be. It really depends on what you want to design. I'm going to set the height to about 60 pixels. But you can come back and edit this at any time. And of course I'm going to set a background color, and I'm not really following any particular color scheme. I'm literally just setting these colors so that you can see it and it's easier for you to follow. So if I come back to design view, you're going to see that we now have the header section and the menu section clearly defined. So let's come back to our code and target the next div, which is going to be the sidebar. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So we have the sidebar and the main body. Okay, so come back to our main CSS. So let's target the sidebar. So you have to make sure that you spell this exactly the same. This is all going to be case sensitive, and I'm just going to give you a clearer demonstration of that in a second. I'm going to set this to probably around 150 pixels, and I'm going to now target the main body div, and basically with the main body div we're just going to set the width to 650 pixels. Now if I come into sorry, didn't use the semicolons. If I come in here, you're not going to see anything because these divs are kind of, well, they're flat at the moment. So let's just give this a height. Let's give it a height of about say 400 pixels. I think that'll do. We can do the same thing here as well. It's 400 pixels. Okay, this is exactly what I knew would happen. To make this a little clearer, I'm gonna actually go ahead and set the background color. Just go ahead and I'm gonna set this to a really obvious color so you can see. I'm gonna set it to a green, and I'm gonna set this background color to let's set it to a blue. So this is going to be a terrible color scheme, but it's going to be super easy for you to see. Now if I actually if I just scroll down, you're going to see that here we have our sidebar and here we have our main body. Now something's wrong here. Okay, so we need these div tags to be side by side, but right now that's clearly not happening. So how do we fix that? Let's come back to our CSS. So on the sidebar, we want this to be on the left side. So basically we're going to float this div to the left. And the main body div tag, we want to float to the right. Okay, now let's see what happens. As you can see, the div tags are now sitting perfectly side by side. And that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. Okay, so let's just target the final div tag, which is our footer. Okay, and once again, this is going to be a little bit different. I'll explain that in a second. So the final thing we need to do is set a height for this, and the height we're going to set is going to be about 100 pixels. Of course, all of this you can customize and you can come back to and change as you wish. Okay, so I'm going to set a few more lines of code here. I'm going to set a margin from the bottom, and I'm going to set the margin to about 21 pixels. And I think I'm also going to set a background color as I have. I'm going to set that to a nice light gray. Okay, and now if I come back to design view, what you're going to see is that I can't see the footer div that I just created. The reason is because we're floating these two divs. We're floating the sidebar to the left and we're floating the main body to the right. And what happens when you float divs is basically the div tags literally float. So imagine that they're not actually sitting on the page, they're sort of hovering above it. The div tags underneath are suddenly going to push up underneath it and just disappear. So how do we fix that? We have to add one more line of code to our footer div tag, and what that is clear. We're going to clear the div tag for both. We're going to clear it for both left and we're clearing it for right. Now let's come back and see what happens. There we go. I can see my footer div, and of course here we go, there's the margin from the bottom. It would actually be smarter, actually, to be honest, to actually rather than set a margin from the bottom on the footer div, because the footer div is actually inside the container div. Let's just put that line of code onto the container. As you can see, there you go. We're now we have a margin all the way around our web page layout. So let's just preview this in our browser. Fantastic. So what we have now is we have our web page layout as we designed it. We have the header, the menu, the sidebar, the main content area, and the footer. Now the second part of the tutorial is now how do we actually make this responsive. What does that mean? It basically means that we're making this layout look different in different browsers, because you might be viewing this at a mobile device or you might be viewing this on a full-on desktop machine, and generally the screen size is going to be quite different depending on if you're using a mobile, a tablet, or whatever. So how do we do that? Well, what we do is we use basically different style sheets. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this web page layout responsive. To do that, I'm going to create a new CSS file within my CSS files folder, and I'm going to call this 800px, which stands for pixels.css. And what that basically means is going to become more clear further on in the tutorial. So let's come back into code view, and I'm in layout.php. I'm going to come to the source code of my page, and just underneath where I link to the main body CSS style sheet, I'm basically going to link to this new style sheet I've just created. Okay, I'm going to link to the 800 pixels style sheet. So we're going to say real style sheet type text CSS, and there we go. Now what this is doing is, as you can see, we now have this CSS document in our page, but what I want to do is I want to call this style sheet here based on a condition, and the condition is that the web page is being viewed in a device that is less than a certain dimension. Okay, so in this example I'm going to be using 800 pixels, so anything that falls below 800 pixels is going to look at this style sheet. Anything above 800 pixels, the style sheet won't be used. So to do that, we're going to use a media query. So we're going to say media equals, and basically here we're going to say screen, and open brackets, close brackets, and within here we're going to say max width 800 pixels. Okay, actually, sorry, here we need to just change that. So what this is going to do is exactly as I just said. This style sheet will now be called if the device used to view the page is below 800 pixels. So let's go into this 800 pixel style sheet. Now all you have to do here is actually just target the divs that you want to manipulate. So as you know, the benefit of this is that what we've actually done is we've not actually set a width for these div tags. We've not set a width for our header, the menu, and we've not even set a width for the footer. We have set a width for the left and right div tags, but that was only really because we're floating them. So what we need to target here is initially the container div. So let's target the container div, and here I'm just going to change the width. So I'm going to change the width to, let's say, 5. Let's make it obvious. Let's say 300 pixels. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. It's as easy as that. Now, as I said, we have got some other div tags we need to target. We need to target the sidebar. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm just going to change the width. So I'm going to change the width here to, at the moment it's 150. Let's change this to 100 pixels. And then we just need to target the main body div. And here I'm just going to set the width to 200 pixels. Oops. Okay, let's save that. Now, if we come back into design view, it's not doing anything. Now let's just launch this in a web browser. Okay. So I just expand this a little bit. Now I'm going to basically replicate this. So to replicate it, I'm just going to resize my browser. As you can see, this is the full page preview. So at the moment, the 800 pixel style sheet we've just created isn't being called because the page is being viewed in a device over 800 pixels. So let's resize the browser to replicate a smaller device. And you're going to see that suddenly our web page layout is changed. And this is exactly what it means to create a responsive web page. Is the design is changing depending on the browser that's used, or the screen rather, not the browser, it's the screen that's used to view the web page, or load or render it out, however you'd like to put it. So it's really simple and easy to do. So let's close that, and let's now go into the final part, the third part of the tutorial, which is actually creating a CSS menu for our web page. So to do that, I'm going to create a new CSS file within my CSS files folder. I'm going to call this menu, menu.css. And just like I did previously, I'm going to go into source code, and I'm going to call the style sheet. So again, href menu.css, real, the style sheet type is text CSS. That's super easy. As you can see, we've got our CSS document now. And basically, I'm going to be putting this into my menu div, which you can see here. So let's, between these two brackets here, I'm just going to create some, click on return to create some space. Now the first thing we need to do is actually create our actual HTML, which is basically, we need to create an unordered list. So we can write this out, but what we have within our property inspector here is, if you select text, is we have some shortcuts. You can actually, select the H1 text, H2. It's just different text, line break, etc. Here it's pretty useful. But it also has the option to create an unordered list and a list item, which is what these two stand for. So I will explain this later on, but just to get going, save some time. The first thing I'll do is within my menu div, I'm going to select UL, and it tells you if you lay your cursor over it. Basically, that stands for unordered list. So U unordered L list, unordered list. Okay, within these brackets, I'm going to create my list items. My list items are my different options. So home, about, services, contact, etc. Each one is a list item. So I'll click the li tags. Now within the li tags, I'm going to create a new bracket, a href, and here I'm going to put hashtag. I'll explain that in a second. And then basically closing and opening bracket / a closing bracket. Okay, So within these two brackets here, I'm going to say home. And okay, so I'm just going to have to explain this at this stage. What does this mean? Okay, so here we have our unordered list. Here we have a list item. And here is our actual our menu option here. So this is the text that will be displayed, and this is the link that will be displayed. The reason I put hashtag is basically if you create a link such as this and you make it hashtag, when someone clicks it, nothing will happen. And this is the only reason I'm doing this is because at the moment I don't have any other pages. I'm not linking to anything, so this is basically just temporary. So it's very simple. Now basically, just to save time, I'm just gonna copy and paste this several times, and I'm just gonna go through change the text. So here we have home, then we're gonna have services, and then probably about, and contact. And I think that's enough, so I'm just gonna end it there. Okay, so let's just come into a design view and see what we actually have. Okay, so we just have created a basic unordered list. What we now need to do is actually style this and actually target and create our menu. So let's go ahead and do that. To do that, we just need to come to our CSS file. What I'm actually going to do to save some time, I'm going to come to my main body CSS, and here we have our menu div, the CSS targeting the menu. I'm going to copy and paste, and I'm going to put that into the menu CSS file here. It's going to work just the same. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to start writing out my actual CSS. Okay, so we're ready to actually start writing the CSS for the menu itself, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'll do is hashtag menu, and we still need to write hashtag menu because we're targeting something within the menu div. So it's kind of like a path. It's menu space, and I'm now targeting the UL tag. So this is basically the unordered list, and all I'm going to do here is set the margin to 0, semicolon, and then I'm also going to set 0 for padding as well. Okay, so we can finish that one. The next thing that we need to do is hashtag menu and li, which is basically the list items. This is very important. Here we're going to first set the list style type to none, and basically if I click in, you're going to see that what that's done is it's basically gotten rid of the dots. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to float these all to the left. That's basically put them all in a nice long row. We're going to display this as, oops. Okay, so we want to display this as a block. And also what we're going to now do is actually set a width of about 150 pixels. We're going to set a height, and the height is going to be 60 pixels, and this is very important that it's the same height as that we had for the menu div. Alright, okay, so if I come into design view now, you're going to see what we've actually created. It's looking quite nice. Okay, so within the list item, we need to also do text align to the center. And basically to put them in the middle, I'm going to set a line height of about 55 pixels. Yeah, so that's perfect. That's centered that just right. Okay, this is starting to take some shape. If I just come to design view, you're going to see what we've created. It's not looking too bad, but we want to start actually giving this some sort of more design features, add some color to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some basically a font family. I'm going to use sans serif. The reason we use a font family is basically it has several font options, as you can see here, And basically what happens is if a browser doesn't support a particular font, it'll just move on to the next one in the list. So that's basically why we use a font family opposed to just a single font. And again, if we come back to design view, you'll see that's changed. But one thing I would like to do is actually set a font size and increase that to possibly 18 pixels. I'm not sure. Yeah, something along those lines. Maybe see what 16 looks like. Might just be a little bit nicer. Maybe between 17. Alright, so this is looking better, but I want to change the font color, and I want to get rid of this underline because it looks kind of nasty. To do that, all we need to do is basically, again, hashtag menu and just write A. What that's going to do is, oh actually sorry, we need to do menu LI-A. Okay, and what we're going to do here is we're just going to say text decoration none, and we're also going to say color, and we're going to set the color to white. Now if I click in, you're going to see that's already drastically changed. If I come into design view, you're going to see again this is starting to take just nicer shape. Now what I want to do is I want to have these different links change color, the background color for whatever is basically the cursor's running over. So to do that, come back to our CSS. We're going to hashtag menu, and then we're going to say list item and hover. Okay, and all we have to do here, of course, is just change the background color. And I'm just going to change this to a lighter gray. And if we come back here, you're not going to see that, of course, unless we save our CSS and preview this in our web browser. Okay, so as you can see, we've created our menu, and if I lay my cursor over either one, has a rollover color. So this is all done with and controlled by CSS, and I think this looks really nice. I like the way this is kind of taking shape. And actually, if I just come back to Dreamweaver, something that you'll be able to do now is actually, if you open up your properties inspector, you can lay your cursor over any one of these text, go to link, and then click on the browse option, and then you can come to files, and you could just select a file within your site root, and that's how you can actually start changing your links and things like that. Thank you very much for following along with this video tutorial. I'd just like to take the chance to encourage you to visit our official Web Developers social network. Here you can view some of our other popular tutorials. We post all of them on our social network. They include creating user registration systems, responsive image galleries, comment systems. We have PHP classes, and even tutorials in creating responsive website layouts. And much more. We even cover tutorials within photography. Please like and follow us on Facebook. You can find our Facebook page on our site. In addition, if you do have any questions about any of our tutorials, you can come to our site and ask a question, and a member of our team will be more than happy to support you. Of course, that is completely free, and of course we offer freebies, including a free user registration system and some many other more interesting freebies. I'd also like to take this opportunity to encourage you to visit our official website, siteeasy.com. There'll be a link in the description of this video to all of our websites and social pages. Here we offer a range of different products and services, including pre-built PHP applications. These include user registration, digital goods for PayPal, comment systems, billing systems, site search, and much more. We also offer pre-built websites. These include e-commerce, social networking, content management, file upload, property listings, and much more. We also offer freebies, and of course we support all of our users. Once again, thank you very much for following along in this tutorial, and as always, please rate, comment, subscribe, and like our Facebook page.